Welcome to another wonderful Brenda Maxfield audiobook. We are excited to have you with us. Before we begin the story, please like and subscribe to our channel and share it with friends. This allows us to continue adding free clean amishromance audiobooks for you to enjoy. The following title is copyrighted by Brenda Maxfield, Amishromance author. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and enjoy the story. The Englischer Stayed Twice is Book 2 in a three-part series called Naomi's Story. And now, The Englischer Stayed Twice. Chapter 1. Fear thou not, for I am with thee, be not dismayed, for I am thy God, I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee, yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. Isaiah 41 verse 10, King James Version. Naomi Byler stood over the single bed in the second bedroom of the Dotty house. Lying on the orange, white, and blue quilt was a folded piece of paper. She stared at it for a long moment before picking it up. Dear Naomi. She sank to the bed, and her hands trembled as she continued reading. I can't begin to explain what these last 5 days have meant to me. Being here, your very first bed and breakfast guest, getting to know you and your precious children, all of it has been a wonder. My life in Texas is hectic at best, frantic at worst. The deadlines for a journalist come hard and fast. But this assignment was different. I don't say these things to garner your sympathy, only to try and explain what staying here has meant. With a quick move, Naomi refolded the paper and stood. No. She didn't have time to read the letter right then. Her cheeks burned at the thought, and she knew she was deceiving herself. She had time. Of course, she had time. But she wanted to avoid the confusing rush of feelings his words brought forth. Resolutely, she shoved the letter in her pocket and began to strip the bed. The sheets and pillowcase would be washed on Monday, along with the rest of the laundry. He would have left a dirty towel, too. She let the sheets fall onto the braided rug and folded the quilt at the end of the bed. No need to strip the other mattress. Justin Moore had come alone. She moved into the bathroom and saw his towel hanging neatly over the bar. She pulled it loose, noting it was still damp. She moved back to the bedroom and dropped it on top of the sheets. Then she moved about the small Dotty house, dusting every surface with an old dish towel. After that, she swept through all the rooms, whether Mr. Moore would have used them or not. Truth be told, the Dotty house wasn't large and giving it a thorough cleaning never took long. All that was left was to wash down the tub and clean the toilet. 10 minutes tops. But it took her 12 minutes before she gathered up the laundry, glanced around the house one last time, and left. Outside, she nudged one of the porch rockers with her foot, lining it up precisely with the second rocker. While she had been busy inside, it had begun to sprinkle. She dashed out into it, feeling the light drops of moisture ping on her forehead. Good thing it wasn't Monday or the laundry would get a second washing with the rain. She pushed through the side door of the big house and put the laundry into a basket in the washroom. "Ma'am," called her daughter Katie from the kitchen. "Would you come here?" Naomi went into the kitchen and saw Katie with her hands in a large glass bowl, pressing bits of dough together. "What are you making?" "Pie," Katie said simply. At 11 years old, the girl had a surprising knack for cooking and baking. "I can't find the rolling pin." "Isn't it in the lower cupboard where it belongs?" Naomi moved to the cupboard. She pulled open the door and saw the rolling pin spot was empty. She stood and put her hands on her hips. "Now, where did it go?" Katie frowned. "I need it right now." "I can see that." Naomi glanced around the kitchen, seeing nothing out of place. "I bet Ben took it." What would your brother want with a rolling pin? Naomi asked with a smile. That boy doesn't cook. Who knows what he's up to? Naomi peered through the kitchen window, scanning the front yard for her 5-year-old son. I don't see him. Put the crust dough in the refrigerator. It'll roll better chilled anyway. But I wanted to have the pie for supper. Naomi stepped to her daughter and gave her shoulder a squeeze. Don't fret. I'll find the rolling pin. She was glad to go back outside, even in the rain. A strange restlessness moved through her, and she pushed down a sudden urge to run. Where to? She had no idea. What was the matter with her that day? She should be excited. The bishop had approved her request to open a bed and breakfast, and she'd made $500 with her first paying customer. She should feel joy and gratitude and an eagerness to continue developing her new business. Instead, she felt depression weigh down her shoulders and seep into her heart. Isaac. If he were still alive, what would he think of this new development? Would her late husband be happy for her? She shivered slightly as the rain gathered on her face and dripped down her neck. No. He wouldn't. He wouldn't want her attention split from the children and her household chores. I have no choice, she said to herself, and in a way, to him. Leasing the farmland brought in just enough to cover the mortgage but not enough to live on. She had to earn more money. She stood under the sweeping elm tree in the front yard and leaned against the bark, taking a moment out of the rain. She spotted Zachariah King out in her fields working. Even from such a distance, he cut a fine figure, muscular and sturdy. He was one of the steadiest people she knew, and she was grateful that he wanted to lease her land. It was strange, she really didn't know that much about him, but he was on her property nearly every day. Not that he spoke with her much. He was a quiet man, despite the amount of laughter she heard when he was with Ben. A few days before, the two of them had gone frog hunting through the trees in the thicket down the road. Ben had come back splattered in dirt and all smiles. They'd located more than a few tree frogs, and Ben had gleefully announced that he was covered in frog germs. After a quick wash-up and a change of clothes, he was still recounting his adventure with excitement. When Naomi tucked him in after Bible reading that night, the last words on his lips were, "Mr. Zach knows where to find all the frogs." "Ma'am." Ben stood just inside the door of the barn and waved at her wildly. "Benjamin." Naomi hollered back. "I've been looking for you." She ran across the yard, her bare feet slipping in patches of mud. She dashed into the barn and wiped her forehead. "Do you have the rolling pin?" Ben's face turned red. Oh. Benjamin Byler. What were you thinking? Katie's in need of it." Naomi shook her head, suppressing a smile. "Where is it?" "But ma'am, I needed it, too." Ben walked to the front corner of the barn. There he'd laid a scrap of plywood. On top of the wood was a pile of grain with the rolling pin sitting beside it. "What the world are you doing?" "I was thinking that I could set up a place to feed the frogs. But then I thought maybe the grain was too big or rough for 'em to swallow. So I'm smooshing it with the rolling pin." Naomi looked down at her son's efforts and bit back a chuckle. "Benjamin, I'm thinking frogs don't eat grain. Horses do. Jaw. But frogs don't. They eat flies and such." Ben puckered his lips into a pout. "So I done this for nothing?" "You did it for nothing." Naomi bent down and retrieved the dusty rolling pin. "I think Mr. King needs to give you some more frog lessons." "Can he come for supper then?" Ben asked, his face alight. Naomi sighed. "I'm sure he's busy. He has his own family." As she said it, she realized again how little she knew of Mr. King's family. She did know he wasn't married, which in itself was curious. Not many men in their late 20s or early 30s were still single in the district. Having been in Hollybrook for barely a year meant Naomi didn't know his history, unlike the rest of the folks around, who seemed to know absolutely everything about everyone, even down to the very hairs on their heads. Can I ask him? Since the accident that had killed her husband and her parents, Naomi hadn't seen much enthusiasm on Ben's face. Truth be told, she didn't want to invite Zach for supper. Somehow, it didn't seem appropriate. Plus, the man had been acting a bit odd of late. The other day, she'd wondered if he was jealous of her English guest. But now, looking at her son's face, she was loath to squash his animation. Fine. But don't be surprised when he tells you no, she said, leaving the barn with the rolling pin in hand. Zachariah King said yes. Naomi had to scramble to set another plate when she saw him coming through the field with Ben jumping about at his side. She shook her head, realizing that Zach had probably only agreed so as not to dampen Ben's spirits. So she and Zach had that in common then. Why's Mr. Zach coming to dinner? Katie asked when Naomi told her. Because he's Ben's friend, and Ben wanted to invite him. Kind of old to be Ben's friend, don't you think? Katie said, never at a loss to offer her judgment on a situation. Never you mind, daughter. Just get out another glass and utensils. Ma'am. Ben's voice echoed through the house. He's staying. Naomi went to greet them as they came in through the side door. Mr. King, how nice of you to join us. He nodded and gave her a smile. He looked a bit embarrassed, and she wondered whether he was recalling his behavior of the other day. I hope it's all right. Ben told me that you said it was fine. Ben was right. It is fine. Feel free to wash up. Supper's almost on the table. She scurried off, giving him time to clean up. She was surprised at her own nervousness. But then even before Zach's dislike of the Englisher, Naomi had often felt unsettled around him. She supposed it was because he always seemed ill at ease around her. Katie's cherry pie had been done for a few hours, so its sweet smell had long since faded. Now the aroma of meatloaf and potatoes filled the house. Katie scooped the potatoes into a serving bowl while Naomi took the meatloaf from the oven. I'm mighty glad you baked a pie today. I'm sure Mr. King will find it tasty. Katie gave a small smile, but Naomi could see the pride on her face. Inwardly, she sighed in relief. Perhaps Katie wouldn't be sour during supper after all. Someday, you're going to have a pie business, Naomi predicted. Actually, your pies will probably bring guests to our bed and breakfast. You're really going to do it, then? Yes, Katie girl, we're really going to do it. A flash of trepidation swept through her at her own conviction. But it would be all right. The bed and breakfast would work out. Of course, it would. They carried the food out to the table. Zach and Ben were already there, freshly washed up. Zach had taken the spot at the end of the table where Isaac used to sit when he and her parents were still alive. Zach was a bigger man than her husband had been, and he looked downright overpowering at the end of the table. His shoulders were wide, and he carried a determination with him that seemed to fill the room. But right then, Naomi saw him fidget with the edges of his napkin as he placed it in his lap. Can Mr. Zach lead the prayer? Ben asked, giving an appreciative glance to his friend. Naomi's breath froze in her throat. Zach lead the silent prayer? She shifted in her chair. That seemed entirely too intimate and too familiar. Zach reached over to where Ben perched on the long wooden bench. No, Ben. That's for your ma'am to do. I'm just a guest. Naomi gazed at him. Zach gave her a steady look, and his eyes were thick with what looked like admiration and understanding. She gulped and bent her head for prayer. Her mind fumbled to form her silent words to God, but Zach's presence had totally thrown her for a loop. And just what was that look he'd given her? Almost as if he could see right through her, into her very soul. Her chest constricted. Focus, Naomi, focus. But she couldn't. The weight of missing Isaac had settled into her heart, and she felt powerless against it. It sat in her like a rock. She squeezed her eyes more tightly, willing the tears to stay away. The seconds ticked by as she struggled to control her grief. Too much time had passed. She cleared her throat, and everyone opened their eyes. Naomi gave a feeble smile, trying her best to mask her pain. Neither Katie nor Ben seemed to notice. But Zach's face became shadowed, and he looked directly at her until she averted her eyes. It was obvious he knew how she suffered. She should feel comforted that someone could sense her pain, but she didn't. She felt flustered and on edge. Why had Zach agreed to supper anyway? He leased her land. Period. If he hadn't been sitting there, she would have made it through dinner just fine. Yet even as she thought such things, she knew it was futile. Zach wasn't the cause of her overwhelming sadness. She nodded at Katie. Start the potatoes around, would you? Katie grabbed up the bowl and handed it to Zach. Ben took a drink of milk, leaving a white mustache on his upper lip. Katie giggled. Wipe your mouth, Ben. You look like an old man. Ben turned his head about with a silly look on his face. Do I look like a bishop? He became stern and eagle-eyed. Then he laughed, and Katie joined in. Children, Naomi scolded, jumping into their conversation with relief. Be respectful, now. Bless the children for providing a distraction. Zach smiled as he helped himself to a huge portion of potatoes. Naomi began to eat, working to swallow past the lump in her throat. She rested her left hand in her lap and heard the faint crinkle of the letter she'd pushed into her pocket earlier. Justin's letter. The Englischer. What would Zachariah think if he knew she had a letter from Justin Moore in her pocket? He wouldn't like it. He wouldn't like it at all. She would finish reading it that evening in the privacy of her own room. A spark of unwelcome anticipation ran through her. Justin had eaten at that very table only this morning. It was strange to conceive it. But now he was gone, and she would never see him again. As she took a drink of milk, she realized she would miss him. She shook her head and frowned. Whoever heard of missing a person they'd only known for 5 days? Ridiculous. After eating 2 helpings of food, Zach scooted his chair back. I need to be heading home, he said. Thank you for the meal. But my pie, Katie said. I made a cherry pie. Zach's eyebrows rose. Did you now? Katie nodded. Well, I can't be missing that, then, can I? Katie jumped up and ran into the kitchen, returning with her cherry pie. Should I bring in the pie plates? I can use this plate, Zach said. No need to be washing extra dishes. Katie glanced at her mother, and Naomi nodded. Katie picked up her butter knife and began to cut the pie into 6 pieces. Then she walked around the table, serving each of them. Any ice cream? Ben asked. No. We ate it all, Naomi responded. You mean Mr. Justin ate it all? Ben said with a laugh. Jaw. He surely did like ice cream. Naomi felt her cheeks flush. She blinked rapidly and quickly took a bite of pie. Delicious, Katie. Once again. Naomi felt Zach studying her. He hadn't been happy that Justin Moore, an Englischer, had been her very first boarder. He'd made that clear with his dour presence every time Naomi turned around. And now, he was making it even clearer with his smoldering eyes. She bristled under his gaze and purposefully looked away. Thankfully, the children chattered through the dessert, relieving Naomi of any need to converse, and then it really was time for Zachariah to leave. Naomi got up to see him to the door, as was her duty as the hostess. Zach paused with his hand on the doorknob and gazed down at her. "Thank you for the meal," he said, his voice low and resonant. "It was mighty good. I'm glad you liked it." The words came stilted from her lips. Zach stepped outside. "I noticed a patch on the east side of your barn roof where the shingles are loose, and some of them are missing. It looks about to leak." Naomi groaned inwardly. She had no money for repairs. "Wait," he said, noting her obvious reaction. "I'm only telling you because you might wonder why I was climbing about on your roof. I'll be fixing it come tomorrow." "No," Naomi reacted. "You lease the land. That surely doesn't include fixing my barn roof." Zach was still for a long moment. Then he spoke, and his words were slow and sure. "You're living in Hollybrook now. That's what we do." Naomi closed her mouth, ashamed at her outburst. She remembered all the times in the past, back in Pennsylvania, when her husband and father had joined a group of Amish farmers to help widow Maeve Bowman. Not just her, either, but the other widows. One time, they completely re-roofed Widow Parkin's house after a particularly windy spring. So that was it. She was the widow now. She was the one who would receive help. She blanched, dismayed to her core to be in such a position. "I don't have any shingles." "I do," he said. He touched her wrist, and the very air around them became electrified. Her throat went dry, and she worked to swallow. When did Zachariah become so disturbing? She blinked up at him. His eyes were dark and unfathomable as he dropped his hand to his side. He gave her one long last look and then went down the steps and walked away. She turned abruptly and hurried back inside. The day couldn't get over soon enough for her. She went back to the dining area and saw that the table had been cleared. In the kitchen, Katie was running the dishwater. "I'll take over from here," Naomi said. "Thank you for all your help. Why not go read a story to your brother? It'll be time for bed soon." "But ma'am, it's not even 8 o'clock yet." Naomi blew out her breath. "It'll be time for bed soon," she repeated. Chapter 2. Thankfully, the children turned in without grumbles. Naomi simply couldn't abide one more hour of anything but solitude. She promised herself that she'd make it up to them the next day and allow them an extra half-hour of play outside after supper. The downstairs echoed its emptiness as Naomi walked through the rooms, adjusting the open windows and straightening odds and ends. The cool wooden floors felt refreshing on her feet, and she began to relax. The sun was sinking, and the shadows through the rooms deepened. She should light a lantern, but she resisted, instead enjoying the peaceful settling of the darkness. The breeze flowing through the windows was humid and heavy, and she smelled the fragrance of the growing plants outside. She could almost sense their developing ripeness, knowing that before long, canning season would be upon her. Harvest was always a frantic and an exciting time. Putting up all that food, feeling its richness, and knowing it was going to take the family through the winter, made a person safe and content. Naomi had always enjoyed the changing seasons and the unique blessings and tasks that came with every shift of the earth. She stepped outside on the front porch and sank into one of the rockers. Would she be able to handle her bed and breakfast plus all the canning that year? Katie would be a big help, but she was only a child. Perhaps Naomi and her friend Mary could do their canning together. Sometimes Amish women put up fruit and vegetables together, but having been in the district a limited time, Naomi wasn't sure about the women in Hollybrook. Besides, she'd never had the need as she'd always canned with her mother. But Mary would know, and Naomi decided to ask her friend about it soon. Naomi's hand went to her pocket, and she felt the crunch of Justin's letters beneath her fingers. It was time. She pulled the letter out and unfolded it. She held it close to her face, but in the growing darkness, she couldn't make out Justin's words. She reached over to the small table beside her, found the matches, and lit the lantern there, carefully replacing the chimney. She reread the first part of the letter. Then she focused on the last half. I don't say these things to garner your sympathy, only to try and explain what staying here has meant to me. I love the quiet rhythm of your life. I love how you live so in tune with the earth and nature. Many people think everyone in Texas lives on a ranch. I can assure you, that isn't true. I live smack in the middle of the city, where things are fast and hectic and impersonal. Ha! My mother always told me I was born in the wrong place. It used to annoy me, but I see the wisdom of her observation now. It really became pointed while staying with you at your bed and breakfast. And to think that I gathered eggs from real live hens. A high point in my life, to be sure. I do hope that you won't forget me, Naomi Byler. I hope we can continue to be friends. I can call you my friend, can't I? Naomi leaned back against the chair and let out her breath. Was she his friend? She supposed so. And no, he needn't worry, she wasn't likely to forget him. She smiled, remembering how he could hardly fit his long legs beneath the dining table. Ben had to scoot the bench back before Justin could squeeze in. And she wouldn't soon forget the look of delight on his face when he found the eggs in the nesting boxes. Naomi focused back on the letter. My work takes me all over the United States. I can only hope that I'll get another writing assignment in Indiana. If I do, I hope you'll welcome me again at Byler's Bed and Breakfast. I'm smiling at you now, in case you don't know it. Well, I suppose I need to close this letter. Think of me when I'm gone, Naomi. As I'll think of you. With great esteem. Justin Moore. He had added his mailing address at the end of his letter. She frowned and pressed her lips together. Did he expect her to write him back? She couldn't do that. It would be highly unseemly, plus nonsensical. What would be the point? She folded the letter and pressed it back into her pocket. The lantern had drawn all the nearby moths and other flying critters from the night. They circled and pinged against the glass chimney. Naomi swatted about herself and then stood. Snuffing out the flame, she went inside. It was time for bed. Naomi sat at her husband's heavy desk and studied the ledger books. Figuring and refiguring her finances had become a necessary evil every morning. She cringed at the figures before her now. The money she'd received for boarding Justin was a big help, but it wasn't enough. Her idea of a bed and breakfast would do her no good without paying customers. She'd been working on a sign to hang out by the road, but it looked crude. She was no artist. And who would want to stay at a place with such an ugly sign? Perhaps she could get someone to make one for her, which of course would mean more money that she didn't have. Ben tumbled into the front room, wiping sleep from his eyes. I'm hungry, he grumped. Naomi stood. Of course, you are. Come on, breakfast is ready. She bustled into the kitchen and grabbed a hot pad. She pulled open the oven door and removed a platter of steaming hot cakes. Yum! Can we have syrup, too? Ben asked, his mood vastly improved. It's on the table. The two went to the dining table where Katie was already seated, everything ready. Katie, how would you like to help me with the bed and breakfast sign after we eat? Naomi asked. We're making a sign? Ben piped up. We need to let people know we're open for business, Naomi explained, realizing that she had to step into a business owner role. I'll help, Katie said. Naomi smiled at her and reached over to pat her hand. I don't know what I'd do without you, Katie girl, she said. Shall we pray? After the kitchen was clean and the barn chores were finished, Naomi and Katie dragged out the large board Naomi had been working on. She'd taken some leftover paint and had tried to make a nice border around the edges. Unfortunately, Naomi's plan for a colorful, yet professional-looking design left much to be desired. Ma'am, it looks like a garden snake winding around the board, Katie said, standing with her legs apart, gazing at it. Naomi burst out laughing. You're right. I knew it was horrid, but I didn't know why. A snake. Maybe the guests will think they'll have snakes in their beds. Katie giggled. Ja, and that we serve fried snake for supper. And we have a snake museum in our barn. Katie grinned at her own joke. Naomi shook her head and continued to chuckle. Aw, Katie. I'm not good at this. Katie tipped her head and studied the sign further. Well, maybe we could make it into a vine with flowers. Naomi considered that. Do you want to give it a try? Look, I have all these bits of leftover paint. Nothing really colorful, though. The flowers are going to be drab. Where's the paintbrush? Naomi hurried back into the barn to fetch it. Here you go. What can I do to help? Katie started giggling again. Ma'am, you've helped enough. Now, if the sign was on a quilt, I'd have done just fine, Naomi defended herself with a smile. Too bad we can't hang a quilt. It'd look so nice. The weather would destroy it. Katie nodded. Ja, it would. A loud bang came from the top of the barn and both Naomi and Katie jumped and looked up. What was that? Katie asked. Then Naomi remembered. I'm thinking it's Zach. He told me he was going to work on the barn roof today. What's wrong with it? He said a part of it was about to leak. Naomi continued gazing up as she began moving around the barn, trying to locate Zach on the roof. Katie followed her. When they rounded the last corner, Naomi saw him. He was on his knees, nailing new shingles onto a darkened patch of roof. He spotted her looking at him. Good morning, Naomi. And Katie, he called down. Good morning. Do you need anything? The brim of his hat shadowed his face. She couldn't see his features well, but she clearly saw his wide smile. I'm fine, he said, pounding in another nail. All right, then. Thank you, Zach. Truly. She left him to it, and she and Katie returned to their sign project. Here's a stick to stir the paint, Naomi said, handing Katie a smooth branch. Some of the colors might be okay because I stirred them yesterday. Some of this paint is ancient. Left behind by the previous owner, I suppose. The two of them got to work. Naomi let Katie do the painting, but in all honesty, the sign still looked amateurish at best. Katie sank onto the ground. Ma'am, it's awful. Naomi joined her on the grass. It's not so bad. But it was. The letters look like big blobs. The paintbrush is too fat. It's ugly, ma'am. For sure and for certain. Naomi sighed. It's the best we've got, so we don't have much choice. Perhaps in the future, we can have one specially made. Sorry it's so bad, Katie said, a dejected look on her face. No need to be sorry. Naomi patted her daughter on her back. It's fine for now. We just have to nail it onto a post and put it at the end of the drive. Ben came skipping from around the barn. Can I go up on the roof and help Mr. Zach? he asked. Naomi frowned. No. The roof's no place for a 5-year-old. But I'm big now. You always tell me so. Naomi gazed at his stubborn expression, and her heart softened. You are big, she said with more gentleness. But what would I do if you fell off the roof? Who would help me with all the barn chores then? Ben looked as if he was considering this. His face brightened. Then, can I help you with that? He pointed to the sign. You sure can, Naomi said, relieved he'd given up the roof idea. We need a long wooden post to nail this sign on. I know where one is, Ben cried, taking off in the direction of the chicken coop. Within minutes, he was back, dragging a dirty post behind him and leaving a trail of smashed grass. Here you go, ma'am. Where did you find that? It's quite perfect. Behind the coop. I spotted it a long time ago. Good for you, Ben. Can you fetch Katie and me a hammer and some nails? Zach's using the hammer. We have more than one. Look on the tool shelf in the barn. He was off, returning in 2 minutes with a hammer and a fistful of nails. Wait a minute, ma'am, Katie said. She bent over with the paintbrush and put another petal on a white flower. Okay. That's better. Ben and Katie held the sign over the post, while Naomi attempted to nail it down. Don't smear the paint, Naomi warned, 2 nails sticking out of her mouth. She focused on her target and gave another swing with the hammer. The nail shot out, flying across the grass. Naomi frowned, her brow wrinkling in concentration. She pulled another nail from her mouth and held it over the sign. Another swing. This time the nail went partway in and folded over to the side. You're no good at this, Ben observed. Naomi sank onto her haunches. I can see that, Ben. Let me try. No. I'm going to try again, she muttered. Need some help? Naomi looked up to see Zach standing a few yards away. His lips were pressed together, and Naomi could clearly see that he was biting back a smile. Mr. Zach! Ben exclaimed, jumping up and letting the sign fall to the side. Ma'am ain't no good at all with a hammer. Zachariah stepped closer, looking down at the sign. He gazed at Katie. How are you this morning, Katie? Fine. She grimaced. The sign's ugly, but we did the best we could. He squinted again at the sign. No, it's not ugly. But it is, Katie insisted. Someday, we're going to get us a proper sign. Zachariah stood next to where Naomi squatted on the ground. She was completely aware of his nearness, and her heart beat faster. More and more she noted her reaction to his proximity, and she couldn't say she was pleased about it. She had no business being so interested in the comings and goings of Zachariah King. She remembered that her friend Mary had offered to tell her Zach's story, whatever that might be. Naomi hadn't taken her up on the offer yet, but right then she decided she would do so. And right soon, if the occasion presented itself. Zachariah got down on one knee beside her and took the hammer from her hand. She could see he was about to reach for the remaining nail which was between her lips. Quickly, she fumbled for it, pulling it out and handing it to him. He held the nail against the bottom of the sign. Paint's still wet, Katie warned. With a swift swing, the nail went successfully through the sign and into the pole. Ben let out a cheer. See, ma'am. Mr. Zach can do anything. Zach flushed at that and kept his eyes on the sign. I need one more nail. Ben scurried to the barn to get him one. Here, you go, he said upon returning. With another swing of the hammer, the sign was secure. Zach stood, pulling up the sign with him. Where do you want it? He asked Naomi, looking at her with blue eyes that shone like cobalt. She stepped back and swallowed. "Please don't worry yourself," she said, reaching to take the sign from him. "The children and I can take it from here." He hesitated, not loosening his grip on the post. "It's no bother." His voice was low and thick with meaning. Again, she wondered if he was somehow trying to announce his interest, stake his claim so to speak. She had wondered it the night he'd stopped in during the supper hour, when Justin Moore was staying. Now, she wondered it again. But before she could determine anything, he let go of the post and nodded at her. "There you are then?" And with that, he turned and walked back around the barn. "Thank you," she called after him. Before Ben could urge him back, she smiled at her children. "Shall we go dig a hole?" Ben grinned and ran toward the barn. "I'm gettin' the shovel," he called over his shoulder. They found a nice smooth spot at the base of their drive, and Naomi let Ben dig the first few shovelfuls. It was hard going, though, and Katie took over. After she'd dug a few shovelfuls full of rocks mixed with the dirt, she handed the shovel to Naomi. "How deep does it got to be?" Ben asked. "Deep enough so it doesn't fall over in the first wind." Katie scowled. "I think we need some cement." Naomi stood straight and regarded her daughter. "You're probably right, but we'll try it this way first." She dug further and then picked up the sign. "I'll hold it for you, ma'am," Ben offered, dragging the sign into the hole and standing it up straight. "Thank you, son." Naomi shoveled loose dirt and rocks around the post. Katie stomped it down hard. Naomi dropped the shovel and joined her in jumping up and down on the dirt. She looked at Katie and started to laugh. "Is this what the English call dancing?" she asked. Katie grinned. "I don't think so." Naomi grabbed her hands around the sign, and they began circling it, stomping and laughing. Ben let go of the post and joined them. They went round and round until Naomi was dizzy. "Stop," she cried, holding up her hand. "I'm going to fall over." "This is fun," Ben said, grabbing Naomi around the waist. It is." Naomi backed up a few paces and observed the sign. "Byler's bed and breakfast." "It doesn't look so bad," Katie said. "I think it looks right fine," Naomi assured her. "Thank you, children, for your help. Now, let's hope we get some business." They walked back to the barn, with Ben dragging the shovel behind him. Chapter 3. Naomi stood at the clothesline, hanging up the sheets from the Dottie house. When she hung the towel that Justin had used, her mind went to the letter she'd tucked safely away in her top drawer under her neatly organized clothes. Her thoughts circled the return address he'd put at the bottom of the page. Did he truly expect her to write back? She'd asked herself the question 100 times. Part of her wanted to. In fact, it would be right nice to have a pen pal of sorts. She could tell him about the bishop's approval and the new sign on the road. She could tell him that she was thinking about getting a cell phone so that potential guests could contact her. But why would Justin Moore be interested in such things? And why would she tell him such things in the first place? Annoyed with herself, she fished another towel out of the basket and hung it up. A faint breeze rippled the fabric. If that kept up, it wouldn't take long for the clothes to dry. She heard a horse approach, and she turned around in time to see Mary coming up the drive in her pony cart. Naomi left her laundry basket where it sat and hurried to meet her friend. "Mary! How nice of you to come. How are your boys getting along?" Mary climbed from her cart and threw the reins around the hitching post. "Oh. Back to themselves, they are. Now Betty is sick. Dear Lord, I knew it was coming." She patted her chest. "But I'm fit as a fiddle, make no mistake. Can you sit a while?" Would like to, Mary answered. I came to give you the rest of the pie money. Thank you again for helping me out by baking those pies for my road stand. She dug in her apron and pulled out a handful of cash. I'm sorry I didn't get this to you sooner. Naomi took the money. No need to be sorry. I was grateful for the opportunity. You made $150, plus whatever you got for that first pie you sold. This is a big help, Mary. Thank you. The two women climbed the steps to the porch and sat in the rockers. Mary was there only a minute before Naomi sprang back up. Oh, where are my manners? Would you like some lemonade? It's already quite hot out. Mary nodded, rocking slowly. Sounds nice. Naomi scurried inside to get 2 glasses of lemonade. When she returned, Mary's eyes were closed, and she was no longer rocking. Had the woman fallen asleep? Naomi smiled and sat quietly beside her. I ain't sleepin' if that's what you think, Mary murmured. You go right ahead and sleep if you want to. Mary's brown eyes popped open. I'm fine. A little cat nap does wonders. Naomi laughed. Well, that cat nap was about 4 minutes long. Mary shrugged. 'Twas enough. The two women sipped their drinks and sat in companionable silence until Naomi remembered her decision regarding Zachariah's story. You were going to tell me about Zachariah King, she said, questioning if such talk would classify as gossip. She chewed the inside of her lip, wondering if she was displeasing God. That I was, Mary said, sitting up straighter. Such a nice man, Zachariah. She looked at Naomi and raised her right brow. Any interest there? Naomi blushed. Back in Pennsylvania, where Naomi was from, courting and love interests were not discussed. Were things different in Hollybrook? Mary slapped her own leg and let out a chuckle. I can see by your face that you aren't going to divulge a thing. No matter. You're part of the district now and should know about the people. Naomi nodded, relieved Mary wasn't going to push the matter. Truth was, Naomi had no idea whether there was interest there. Her heart beat harder when Zach was around, but she was pretty sure it was because the man made her nervous. He certainly seemed ill at ease around her. She stopped rocking, and her thoughts sharpened. Until the last day or two. Zach hadn't seemed ill at ease in the least when he'd fixed her roof or when he'd helped with the sign. Naomi? Mary questioned. Naomi gave a start. What? Oh, I'm sorry. What were you saying? You have a new sign, I see. Jaw. It's crude, but it'll do. I hear Jacob Westwork is a master at working with wood. He could make you one. Naomi thought about the money she'd just gotten from Mary and knew it wouldn't be enough. Perhaps. But in the meantime, it's acceptable, don't you think? Mary shrugged. Certainly. But if you change your mind, I'll put in a word. Naomi took another sip of lemonade. Thank you. Now, about Zachariah. Mary's eyes got a faraway look in them. He was a bit younger than me in school. A bright boy, I remember that. But quiet. Never said much. Anyway, he was the youngest of a parcel of children. Not coddled, mind you. Truth be told, I think his mother was downright exhausted when he came along. Pretty much raised himself. She laughed. Naomi nodded, visualizing a young Zach keeping to himself amidst a huge family. A ping of sadness ran through her. Her own family would never be large, but she did have the 2 children, and she was grateful. She craned her neck and saw Ben and Katie playing on the tire swing out back. She'd wanted more than 2 children. In fact, she'd hoped to have another on the way by that summer. But now, with Isaac gone, she was relieved it hadn't happened. She was barely surviving with trying to take care of the children she did have. And Isaac would never have laid eyes on his third child. When Zach was a teen, he didn't really participate in his Rumspringa time. He just kept working the farm with his dad. But he was sweet on Marcy Bleckenship. That girl was something else. New to the district and full of spice, that one. Mary shook her head. Zach fell hard for her. Took her to Sunday youth singings a couple times. Before she began her Rumspringa, that is. Naomi leaned forward in her chair. She could tell where this was heading. Marcy went a bit crazy. She would disappear for days on end. Like I said, Zach was always a quiet sort, but when Marcy was gone, he wouldn't speak at all. At least in public. I can't vouch for him at home. When I'd see him at church, he was like a closed door. Mary reached out and touched Naomi's arm. It was the worry. He was worried sick for her. With cause, too, as it turned out. How sad, Naomi said, imagining how Zach must have felt. Marcy's parents were frantic. I know they went to the bishop for help, but there wasn't much to be done. Wait it out, I suppose. And pray. I think everyone in the district prayed for the girl. When she'd swoop back into Hollybrook, though, she'd make some of the people so upset. Mary shook her head and sighed. She flaunted herself, and it got so bad that folks were hiding their kinner when she'd come around. Mary rocked hard in her chair. But Zach stayed true. I know he attempted to see her when she was here. Sometimes, she'd calm down, too. Put her Amish clothes back on. Attend a Sunday meeting here and there. She'd sit with the women, her back straight as a board. But there was something in her eyes, something wild and proud. What did Zachariah's parents say about it all? Mary sighed. They wanted to send Zach off to relatives in Ohio, but he talked them out of it. I think he figured if he left, there would be no one to bring Marcy back to the church. The two women fell silent. Naomi turned her head and gazed out into her fields. She couldn't see Zach, but she knew he was out there somewhere, working. That's so sad. Whatever happened to her? To her family? Mary threw out her hand in a dismissive wave. The whole family packed up and left. Just like that. It was too much to bear. And Marcy? Who knows? Mary clucked her tongue. Although, Zach probably knows. Thing is, I believe they were engaged. Naomi's brows shot up. Really? Jaw. Pretty sure. Of course, we keep such news quiet around here, despite my teasing you, but I think they were. No other reason for Zach to react in such a way. Maybe he loved her. He loved her all right. Mary grimaced. The man's still single, ain't he? Naomi nodded, still grasping what the whole experience must have done to Zach. Never saw him interested in anyone since. Mary leaned close and laid her hand on Naomi's knee. Till you, maybe. Naomi jerked back against the rocker. No. He's not interested in me. You sure about that, Naomi Byler? You sure? Mary didn't wait for an answer. She set her empty glass on the small table by her chair and heaved herself to her feet. I need to get back to my brood, she announced. Been gone long enough? Thank you for the lemonade. Naomi stood, blinking at the rapid end to the conversation. Mary huffed down the steps, grabbed the reins, and climbed into the pony cart. Mind my words, dear friend. She gave Naomi a smile and a nod before she slapped the reins on the pony and went on her way. Naomi watched her leave. She ran her finger around the top rim of her glass, over and over, as her mind circled what she now knew. Oh, Zachariah. How he must have hurt. And it must have gone deep, or he would be married by now and have a passel of children. Absently, she set down her glass and walked back out to her laundry basket. Was Zachariah interested in her? And why? She was nothing special. She bent down and grabbed a wadded-up sheet from the basket. She shook it out and flung it over the line, clipping it in place with 3 clothespins. A gust of wind blew the sheet back into her face, and she laughed as it softly whipped her cheeks. She heard the crunch of gravel and a car motor behind her. She turned and saw a pale yellow pickup truck approach her porch. She hurried to greet whomever it was. A tired-looking woman, with graying brown hair rolled down her window. "Is this the bed and breakfast?" She pointed over her shoulder. "We saw the sign." Excitement surged through Naomi. "It is. Would you like to stay?" The woman let out a groan. "Thank God. We're so exhausted." She gestured with her thumb to the man driving. He looked older than she was. His hair had already turned completely white. "My dumb husband managed to get us lost about 5 times today so far. We're supposed to be miles closer to Chicago by now." She gave a disgruntled sigh. "When are you going to let up?" the man interjected from the driver's seat. "This fine woman don't need to hear your griping and fussing." The woman pursed her lips. Naomi stepped back, wondering what kind of guests these two would be. But she wasn't in a position to be picky, and they seemed safe enough. "I need to explain something," Naomi said, putting on her friendliest smile. "This is a real Amish experience, so there isn't any electricity. However, there is a hot shower and good home-cooked meals." "No internet then?" the woman asked. Naomi braced herself. "No." "Good," she exclaimed. "This guy sticks his face into his tablet, and I don't see a lick of him all evening long." She glared at her husband. "Hear that? Now we can have a proper conversation." The man rolled his eyes, and Naomi felt pity for him. Who would want a conversation with her? "How much a night?" the woman asked. $100. "And that includes some meals?" "It does. I'll be serving supper at 6. The woman was already opening her door. When she stepped out, Naomi was surprised at how short she was. Short or not, she slammed her door with enough force to shake the truck. "Get them bags, Harv," she ordered. She turned to Naomi. "Name's Clara. That there is Harv." Naomi nodded. "Nice to meet you. Let me show you to your lodgings." "Don't we stay in this here old house?" Clara asked, her eyes roaming over the place. "No. You'll be staying in the dotty house out back." "The what house?" "I'll show you." Naomi smiled and led the woman around the house. She heard the other truck door slam. She glanced over her shoulder and saw Harv lugging 2 bags and scrambling to catch up. "Shall we wait for your husband?" Naomi asked. Clara made a face. "I guess. Boy, has he slowed down in the last few years." "I'm coming," Harv called out, huffing a bit. When he caught up, Naomi took them up the steps and into the dotty house. Clara looked about, her face lighting up. "Why, this is downright cozy." She walked to the lantern on the table. "We used to use lanterns just like this when we went camping. Remember that, Harv?" Harv dropped both bags on the floor with a resounding thud. "Yes, Clara, I remember." Naomi walked toward the bedroom and knew she had to make a quick decision. When Justin Moore had stayed, she'd put him in what used to be her children's room. She couldn't abide having him sleep in the same bed where she and Isaac had slept. It had seemed wrong, somehow. But now, with a couple, how could she offer them the room with the 2 single beds when there was a perfectly good room with a double bed? She swallowed past the growing lump in her throat and resolutely directed them toward her former bedroom. She pushed open the door, and her breath caught as she once again looked at the familiar space. Images of Isaac filled her mind, but she stubbornly forged ahead. "Here is your room," she said, forcing a smile. Clara looked about and cackled like one of the hens in the coop outside. "Oh, honey, don't you have a room with 2 beds? Harv and I don't sleep together." Naomi's eyes widened, and she struggled not to show her relief. "I do. Right in here." She took them to her children's room. "There are 2 mighty comfortable beds right in here." Clara plunked down on the bed closest the window. "I'll sleep here." "Harv, you can take that one." Harv nodded, his cheeks reddening. Naomi had never seen a wife treat her husband with such disrespect. It was bordering the scandalous. Was this how Englishers related to one another in marriage? The closest thing she'd ever witnessed to this was back in Pennsylvania when Ona Helmuth had harshly scolded her husband in front of the whole district for forgetting to bring his tools to a barn raising. Everyone had looked away in shame. Such an uncomfortable feeling. Walter Helmuth's face had turned beet red, and he'd hustled her right back into their buggy and took off. When he'd returned to help, with his tools, Ona was nowhere in sight. "So, dinner is at 6? Ja, supper is at 6. Clara patted the quilt she was sitting on. "Don't we have to sign some type of register or something?" Naomi's mind whirled. She had no register. "Ja, of course," she said, "but you can sign it when you come in to eat." She figured she could use the back portion of her ledger book for a register. She grimaced. What else didn't she have in place for this new business? "Thank you kindly, ma'am," Harv said. "We'll be on time to eat. Don't you worry." Naomi smiled. "I'm not worried at all. Now, you have fresh towels in the bathroom. Let me know if you need anything else. Is it all right if I leave my truck where it is? Or do you want me to move it elsewhere?" Naomi considered that. "It's fine for now. You're tired. Why not take a rest?" He looked relieved. "Don't mind if I do." "Now, Harv, don't sleep away the rest of the day," Clara said. Naomi took her leave, shutting the screen door gently behind her. Land sake, what must living with that woman be like? She grinned just thinking about it. What's so funny? She flinched and looked to her left, seeing Zachariah approach. "My guests." "Oh, it's nothing. I saw the truck pull in. Made quite a cloud of dust." That it did. She gave a quick glance to her damp laundry, some still in the basket. "I hope it didn't dirty my laundry." He fell into step beside her, and her mind returned to all she'd learned about him. He paused at the clothesline as if waiting for her to say something. She looked at him, but all she could think of was Marcy and how the girl had hurt him. Zach's expression turned puzzled, and his eyes narrowed. "I saw Mary came by earlier. She been talking about me?" Naomi flinched. Were her thoughts written so clearly on her face? "What do you mean?" He shook his head. "Nothing. Just a look in your eyes." She licked her lips, unaccustomed to such familiar talk with a man who wasn't family. She certainly wouldn't have expected such a discussion with Zachariah. Up until the previous week, he'd hardly said 2 words to her. "Ja, Mary came by," she blurted and then clamped her mouth shut. What was she planning to say? He nodded slowly, and a knowing came over his face. "So, she told you, then?" Naomi took a deep breath but didn't respond. Zach continued to look at her, his clear blue eyes watching her, assessing her. Naomi's heart raced. She bent down to grab another piece of laundry. She put a couple clothespins in her mouth and set about her work, trying to pretend he wasn't there, trying to pretend that his presence wasn't filling the air around her. It didn't work. His nearness was like a physical force, surrounding her, making it difficult to function properly. Finally, after clumsily clipping 3 of Ben's shirts to the line, she dared glance over at him. He met her gaze and said one word. "Marcy." Naomi dropped her hands to her sides. Jaw. With a sharp inhale, he looked up at the sky for a moment, then back to her. "If you'd lived here your whole life, you'd already know the story. So, I guess no harm done." "I'm sorry, Zach." "For what?" "For the way Marcy treated you. For the way it all worked out." His jaw tightened, and she wondered if she'd gone too far. "She's living in Cleveland now." Naomi's eyes widened. "Cleveland?" "She was in Chicago for a while, but she followed some guy to Cleveland." "So, she's married? Has a family?" He shook his head. "I don't know if she's married. She has 2 children, though." Naomi reached out to touch his arm but thought better of it. "I'm sorry." "She writes me?" "Not often. Maybe every year or 2. That was surprising news. Why would Marcy continue to write him unless she was still in love with him? Was Marcy hoping for something further from Zach? And did Zach write her back? Naomi wanted to know so badly that she had to bite her lower lip to keep from asking. It wasn't her business. No matter how she looked at it, it wasn't her business at all. Zach took a step closer, and her whole being seemed to be filled with waiting. His gaze was penetrating, and she found that she couldn't look away. "Ma'am." Ben hollered from the front porch. "Ma'am, Katie's wanting you." Naomi flinched and blinked rapidly. "All right," she called back, her eyes still on Zach. Zach stepped away and looked at the ground, but not before she saw a flush in his cheeks. "I need to go," she said. There was a quiver in her voice. "Of course," he muttered. He ran his hands down his sides. She hurried toward the porch, her heart still beating rapidly. "Naomi?" Zach called after her. She stopped and looked over her shoulder at him. He studied her face, the laundry fluttering in the breeze at his side. "I never write her back." Naomi hesitated, feeling relief whoosh through her stomach. She gave him a slight nod and then disappeared inside the house, wondering why she should care so much. Chapter 4. Katie helped immensely with getting supper on the table that evening for their guests. Naomi was pleased to note the happy way her daughter bustled about the kitchen. If Naomi didn't know better, she'd say Katie was downright giddy about cooking for company. "What are they like, ma'am?" Katie asked as Naomi arranged raw vegetables on a platter. Interesting," Naomi replied. "You'll see soon enough." As soon as the words escaped her lips, she heard a commotion at the front door. She threw down her dish towel and rushed to attend to her guests. "Harv, for pity's sake, quit crowding me," Clara fussed, as they both tumbled in the door. "Good evening," Naomi said, opening the door even wider. "Come right in." "I was trying, but this one," Clara jerked her head toward Harv, "wants to walk on my toes." Harv rolled his eyes and smiled at Naomi. "You've got a beautiful place here." Naomi returned his smile. "Thank you." "My, what smells so good?" Clara walked past Naomi toward the dining area. When she caught sight the table, where Katie had already set out half the food, she gave an appreciative whistle. "This looks fit for a king." The woman climbed over the bench and tucked herself in. "Can't hardly wait to eat a real live Amish cooked meal." Harv followed Naomi. She offered him a seat at the end of the table, instead of next to his wife. Actually, Clara was sitting in Ben's spot, which Naomi was quite certain her son wouldn't like. Right then, Ben came skidding into the room, stopping short when he saw Clara. "Ben," Naomi said, hurrying to him. She put her hands on his shoulder and squeezed. "I thought you could sit next to Katie this evening." She gave him a pointed look. He peered around her at Clara, and Naomi saw his look of dismay. "All right, ma'am." When everyone got situated, Naomi spoke. "Shall we say the silent blessing?" She wondered how Clara and Harv would react, but like her first guest Justin Moore, the two of them bowed their heads without a word. She sent up her prayer to God. "God, thank you for sending 2 more guests to us this night. Help them to be blessed and to rest well. Guide me as I tend to their needs. Thank you for my children and for the food you have given us. Amen." Naomi cleared her throat and everyone looked up. "Katie, would you like to start the potatoes around?" The meal went smoothly. Clara was so busy eating second and third helpings that she didn't have time to talk. Surprisingly, she barely said a word. As Naomi watched the woman eat, she began to wonder whether she should charge extra for meals. However, Harv didn't eat as much as Clara. All he had was 1 full plate and a generous helping of Katie's pie. After finishing his food, Harv put down his fork, stood, and stretched. "Thank you, Ms. Byler. I think I'll turn in now." "You're welcome. You know where the lanterns are, Ja?" "Yes, ma'am." Clara dabbed at the corners of her mouth with her napkin. "It'll be just like camping again, won't it, Harv?" She extricated herself from the bench. She moved her head this way and that as if stretching her neck. "Driving for hours on end really does put an ol' crick in the neck, doesn't it?" "I'm sure it must," Naomi replied. "Let's leave these fine people alone now." Harv glanced at both Katie and Ben. "Nice to meet you young folks. We'll see you in the morning. Clara, you coming?" He looked at her expectantly. Clara scowled but followed him to the door. "What time is breakfast?" she asked. "I can serve it at 7:30, if that suits." "That will be fine," Harv said before his wife could respond. "I guess he's doing all the talking for me tonight," Clara said with a grunt. As they went out the door, Naomi heard Clara scolding Harv about what a big mouth he had. Naomi shook her head. She would never get used to hearing a wife speak to her husband like that. Why, it would create total anarchy in the home. She snickered. She wished Isaac could be there to witness it. He'd be shocked beyond words. Naomi saw her guests off after breakfast. Clara seemed quite excited about their stay, saying she would recommend Byler's bed and breakfast to all her friends. Naomi groaned inwardly. Would Clara's friends have the same sort of personality as Clara? And then she admonished herself. It wasn't her place to judge. Besides, the $100 she'd received didn't depend on personalities, now, did it? During the early afternoon, Naomi took a break from her cleaning and walked out to the mailbox to fetch any letters that might have been delivered. Her eldest brother in Pennsylvania had taken to writing her nearly every week. Mostly to urge her return, but he often included a tidbit of news about the family. Naomi had gotten in the practice of skimming the first part of his letters where he chastised her for remaining in Indiana and focusing in on the news. She enjoyed hearing how the Kinner were doing, and she liked hearing about the district happenings. Naomi was grateful that her children never mentioned wanting to move back to Pennsylvania. She had thought they'd be yearning for their old home, but they hadn't said more than a word or two, causing her to think that her decision to stay put after the accident had been the right one. She paused for a moment to look at her bed and breakfast sign before grabbing the mail. It was still standing upright, so evidently cement hadn't been necessary after all. Nestled there next to a young poplar tree didn't help the beauty of the sign's design, but even so, it had been effective, getting them guests. Still, someday, she'd like to have something nicer looking. She opened the metal door of the mailbox and reached inside. There was only one letter, and when she pulled it out, she quickly saw it wasn't from her brother. When she noted the return address, her knees went weak, and she nearly stumbled right there on the road. Texas. Naomi only knew one person from Texas. One. She stuffed the letter into her pocket and rushed back to the house. Why was he writing her? And so soon? Had something happened? And if it had, why would he tell her about it? She headed straight upstairs to her room and sank onto her bed. Her hand shook as she retrieved the letter from her pocket. With a quick movement, she ripped it open. Her breathing turned shallow as she unfolded the paper and began to read. Dear Naomi Byler, you must think it odd to be receiving another letter from me so soon. You haven't responded to my first letter yet, but I felt the need to write again. I hope you'll forgive my eagerness. Naomi took an unsteady breath and forced herself to calm down. There was no call for her to be so nervous about a letter. Nervous or excited? Which was it? She shuddered and focused again on Justin's words. Upon my return to Texas, I plunged right into my work. As I told you before, life here is hectic, fast, and often impersonal. When I go home at night to my apartment, to my electricity, to my every convenience, I find my heart is still in Amish country. I find my thoughts are still on you. What is Naomi doing right now? I wonder. Is Ben finding any more frogs in the trees? Has Katie made more pies? It's silly, really. I was there for a mere 5 days, but I can't shake it from my every waking thought. Soon, my boss will scold me for daydreaming. Ha! Have you traveled much, Naomi? I wish you could see my home state. It's beautiful. And vast. The land varies from region to region. I've seen most every inch, what with growing up here and my journalism assignments. You would like the wide open spaces, I'm thinking. You would like the agriculture here. And the ranches. Ever been to a dude ranch? Ha! I imagine you haven't. A dude ranch? Naomi had no idea what that was. Of course, she knew about ranches, but dudes? She squinted her eyes, pondering. Wasn't dude the English word for a friend or a boy? If so, dude ranch didn't make much sense. She smiled and continued. I'd love to take you to a dude ranch sometime. There's a fine one close to my city. Actually, they're scattered throughout the state. A good way to cash in on some major tourism dollars. I hope you're having guests at your bed and breakfast now. Of course, it hasn't been so long since I left. You may not have gotten anyone yet. So am I your one and only so far? Naomi blanched at his words. Her one and only? Uneasiness crept through her. Surely he didn't mean that the way it sounded. Was he becoming brazen with her? She dropped the letter onto her lap. Perhaps she shouldn't continue reading. She stood up and Justin's letter fluttered to the floor. It landed right side up, and she stared at it. With a start, she realized she was still trying to read his words, but she couldn't from that distance. She bent down and picked it up as guilt pinged through her mind. But in truth, it was a letter to her. She had an obligation to read it, didn't she? Zach had read the letters that came from Marcy. She didn't have to respond to Justin. Yet, he sure would be happy to know of her 2 guests. She sank back on the bed, and her hand trembled as she held the letter up once again. I was thinking that perhaps I could help advertise your place. You mentioned the possibility of securing a phone for your business. Have you done that yet? Is it even allowed? If you had a phone, I could refer people to your number. Please let me know. I would dearly love to be of assistance to you in any way I can. Well, I think this letter has been long enough. I find myself reluctant to stop writing, for this feels almost as if we're talking to one another. A one-sided conversation to be sure. If you can, please write me back. Sincerely, Justin Moore. He'd written his phone number across the bottom of the letter. Why, she couldn't call him even if she did have a phone. It would be completely frowned upon. More than that, it was forbidden. She folded his letter back up and stuck it in the envelope. She stood and walked to her dresser. Pulling open the top drawer, she felt under her clothing for his first letter. When her hand felt the edges of the paper, a tingling shot through her. She tucked the new letter under the old. She pushed the drawer shut and went back to her bed to sit down. She glanced at her bedside table. She hadn't written in her journal for a day or two, and she should get caught up on it. She could take a few more moments to herself. The children were playing out back and most of the supper meal was to be leftovers from the day before. Lying back on her pillow, she stared up at the ceiling. Was Justin more sweet on her? Katie had accused him of that very thing a few days ago. Not to his face, of course. She'd shot the words at Naomi. But why would he be sweet on her when he knew full well that nothing could come of it? So why am I even thinking about it? And why does my heart beat faster when I think of him? Naomi closed her eyes and forced herself to take slow, even breaths. She lay motionless, but her mind whirled with troubling thoughts. She felt tears gather in her eyes and slip down her cheeks, but still, she didn't move. If only Isaac was there. If only he hadn't died. If only. She squeezed her eyes shut. No. God was sovereign. He was not to be questioned. A sudden image of Zachariah on her barn roof filled her mind. She saw him on his haunches, nailing the new shingles into place. She saw him look down at her and smile. Now, her barn wouldn't leak, and the hay wouldn't mold. She turned to her side and drew her knees to her chest. What an odd thing to come to mind right then. What an odd thing, indeed. Chapter 5. The following week saw no guests at Byler's bed and breakfast. Naomi walked out to the road each evening to make sure their sign was still in place. You have to advertise, Mary admonished her one morning. Customers don't usually fall out of the sky. Naomi looked at her friend. Do you advertise? For your road stand. Mary laughed. No. Don't have to. She shook her head. I guess customers do fall from the sky. Naomi sighed. Mary reached over and squeezed her arm. Don't fret. It will happen. Things take time, you know. That I know, Naomi answered. Her mind flitted to her children and how long it had taken them to smile again. She still wondered about Katie. The girl turned sour so easily these days. I'm glad you stopped by to visit. You do know about the quilting frolic this Saturday, don't you? Naomi paced herself with Mary's short legs as they returned from the chicken coop with Mary's apron full of eggs. No, I didn't know. Can I bring the children? Naomi Byler. Of course, bring the children. There will be a flock of them. Lois Schrock is hosting, and she always has a table of goodies for them. My young ones love going to her house. Some of the older girls like caring for the young ones, too. Your Katie might like that. She nudged Naomi. The children are entertained, so we women are left quite alone. Naomi grinned and knew the Amish grapevine would be in full swing that day. "I'd better be getting back," Naomi said. "Katie and Ben are weeding the garden, and they'll be wanting a snack right soon." "Thank you again for taking the time to stop by," Mary said. "I'll see you Saturday around 9, then?" "Ja, you'll see me Saturday." Naomi hurried down Mary's drive out to the road. She'd walked that morning, feeling the need to clear her head with the bright sun and a leisurely pace. She'd been stewing of late, more than usual. Trusting the Lord God with her finances was becoming more and more difficult. She'd thought she had found the answer with the bed and breakfast, but without guests, it was not helping at all. Thank goodness she hadn't spent money on it yet. She'd been ready to get herself a cell phone, but she'd put it off. Now, she was glad she had. 2 sparrows chased each other in front of her, finally settling on a tree branch close to the road. She gazed at the 2 tiny creatures as they fluttered their wings and jerked their heads about. "Looking for your next meal?" she asked them. "Godspeed to you." As she neared her house, she was surprised to see a red car parked in front of the house. She increased her pace. Guests? Katie was standing on the porch, talking with 2 women. When Katie spotted her mother, she waved her over even though Naomi was already on her way. "Good afternoon," Naomi said with a wide smile. "Can we be helping you?" The taller of the women turned to her. "We saw the sign. We'd like to stay the night." She tipped her neatly coiffed head toward Katie. "Your daughter here says you have a vacancy." Naomi gave Katie a grateful nod. "My daughter is correct. Will it just be the 2 of you? And how many nights would you like to stay?" The short woman clapped her hands, and Naomi couldn't help but notice how the flesh of her arms flapped when she did so. "This is marvelous," the woman exclaimed, her voice high and animated. "I've told my husband for years that I wanted to know more about the Amish." She leaned toward Naomi as if telling her a secret. "For years, mind you. He won't believe our luck." "Neither will mine," the tall woman said. "One night only. And yes, just the 2 of us. How much will this cost? And will we need to share a room?" Naomi's mind flitted to her old bedroom, the one where no one had stayed as of yet. "No," she said, hiding her reluctance. "You can each have your own room. The cost is $100, which includes meals if you choose. Please follow me." The 2 women scurried to get their bags and followed Naomi. She'd left the windows open in the Dottie house, and it smelled fresh and sweet when they entered. "I do need to explain that we have no electricity. This is an authentic experience," Naomi said, praying they wouldn't change their minds. "No electricity," the short woman said, stopping. A doubtful look crept over her face. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Lynette," scolded the taller. "You can live without your precious television shows for one night." Lynette scowled. "And what about you, Nadine? What are you going to do when your tablet battery goes dead?" Nadine huffed. "I'm not going to complain, that's what. Look, this is our chance. You going to spoil it because of no electricity?" Naomi felt like an eavesdropper, standing there while they made up their minds. Lynette clucked her tongue and shook her head. "Of course, I'm not." She looked at Naomi. "Please forgive me. I'm an old fool. This is perfect." The 2 women looked around the small house. Lynette walked to the kitchen sink and peered out the window. "Is this one of those daddy houses?" Naomi bit back her smile. "We call it a Dottie house. But, in a way, it is a daddy house. Shouldn't your elderly parents be living here?" she continued. "Lynette! You're being nosy." Nadine looked at Naomi. "You don't have to answer that. Honestly, how rude. It's fine, Naomi said, realizing that she'd better get used to prying questions if she was going to host outsiders. My parents are both deceased. The rest of my kin live in Pennsylvania. Then why'd you move to Indiana? Lynette! Stop harassing the poor woman. Nadine's small gray eyes settled on Naomi. But really, why did you move here? Naomi swallowed. My husband and father wanted to farm this land. Of course, Nadine responded. Makes sense. How are they doing then? How does your father like it around here? He was killed in a traffic accident. Naomi moved to the bedrooms. Enough was enough. Oh, honey. I'm so sorry. Nadine exclaimed after her. Now, you've done it, Lynette muttered under her breath, but Naomi clearly heard her. It was a while ago. Please don't worry. Naomi opened the door to the children's old room. One of you can stay in here. There is a lantern and matches on the table. She walked past them to the other bedroom and opened the door but didn't look inside. The other of you can sleep here. A choking sensation was climbing up her throat. If she didn't get out of there fast, she could suffocate. The air was becoming thinner by the second, and she grew heady. Supper will be at 6 o'clock. We'll see you then, she managed to choke out. She hurried from the house, letting the screen door bang shut behind her. A thin layer of sweat broke out on her upper lip. She stopped at the side door of the big house, leaning against it, trying to compose herself. Naomi? She closed her eyes. Naomi, are you all right? The concern in Zach's deep voice was like another layer of heat covering her. Smothering her. She slumped against the door, sliding down. Zach rushed to her side, grabbing her under her arms and pulling her back up. Naomi, he cried. She leaned into him, and he managed to get the screen open to help her inside. He lowered her to a stool in the washroom. She dropped her head, closing her eyes. How incredibly embarrassing. What was wrong with her? If this was going to happen when two old women asked her questions, she was going into the wrong business. Can you sit up by yourself? Zach asked, bending over her as if trying to look into her eyes. Jaw. She straightened her shoulders, but she was too ashamed to raise her face to him. All right. He left her and went into the kitchen. She heard him in the cupboard and heard the tap go on then off. He came back, holding a glass full of water. Drink, he said. It will make you feel better. She took the glass and gratefully took a long drink. It did make her feel better. I'm sorry. I don't know what got into me. You have new guests? Jaw. Two women. Zach stepped back as if he wanted to get a better look at her. Your face was white as cow's milk, he said. It's better now. Thank you. For helping me, I mean. The worry lines etched across his forehead softened. I want to help you, he uttered, and then as if realizing what he'd just said, his cheeks colored. He took off his straw hat and ran his hand over his mouth and chin. I'm done with my field work for the day. A sudden sensation that the washroom was too small for the both of them came over her. She stood, feeling steadier now. That's good. Jaw. He fingered the brim of his hat. The fencing around your pig pen needs fixing. That critter is going to escape before long. Naomi frowned. She hadn't paid much mind to the hog lately. Ben was in charge of feeding him. I'll get on it. Zach reached out and touched her arm, and a deep surge of heat zapped through her. He jerked his hand back, as if he'd felt it, too. I'll fix it. That's why I was mentioning it. So you wouldn't worry. But Zach, you mustn't. You lease the land. You're not responsible for fixing things around here. I can do it. You already fixed the roof. Naomi. His voice was firm. He pressed his hat back on his head and stepped toward the door. I said I'll do it. So, I'll do it. And with that, he walked out of the house, shutting the door behind him. She stared at the closed door. Taking a step across the room, she watched him through the thin cotton curtains at the small window. His stride was long and determined. Angry-looking, almost. She shivered. Why would he be angry? There was no reason. Was there? Chapter 6. At 10 minutes after 6, when Katie was tapping her bare foot against the floor of the kitchen, there was noise at the front door. Finally! Katie cried. I'll get the food on the table. Thank you, daughter. Naomi went to the front door to let the two guests in. She wondered at herself when she didn't tell them that they could use the side door from then on. Was she trying to keep her distance from them? We're mighty hungry, said Nadine with a wide smile. Been itching for some Amish cooked food, said Lynette. Please come through and take a seat, Naomi directed. The women followed her to the dining area, and Naomi smiled as they both perched on the bench next to Ben. Hello there, young fella, Nadine said. She reached out to tussle Ben's hair, but Ben made a slight movement back and her hand dropped to her lap. This is my son, Ben, Naomi said quickly. And helping with supper is my daughter, Katie. Nice to know you, Lynette said, nodding. She glanced around the table, looking at the place settings. Naomi could practically hear her counting them. And your husband? The woman asked, her brows raised. Naomi's gaze darted to both her children before answering. He was in the accident with my father. My mother, too, she said, her voice soft. They're all deceased. Lynette's eyes widened, and her cheeks turned pink. Oh. I'm real sorry to hear that. Then who was the young man out in the fields earlier? Nadine asked. Katie blinked and turned on her heel back to the kitchen. That's Mr. Zach, Ben said. Naomi put her hand on Ben's shoulder. Zachariah King. He leases our land to farm. I see, Nadine said. Katie returned with a basket of bread, but Naomi could see that her eyes were moist and her lips were pressed tightly together. Thank you, Katie. Naomi sat and nodded to Katie's spot. Katie sat, staring down at her plate. Shall we say the blessing? During the meal, the two women kept up a constant stream of chatter. Naomi was thankful that it wasn't all questions she had to answer. She was also grateful that she didn't have to say much. Katie was completely silent, and Ben began to look sleepy enough to fall right off the bench. Finally, after an hour of nonstop talk, the two got up and moved from the table. What time is breakfast? Nadine asked. We can serve it at 7:30, unless you have a different preference, Naomi said. How about 8:30? Lynette asked. Even that's a bit early. Now you know, Lynette, interjected Nadine, we need to be getting on the road. True. But there's time enough, I would think. Then, we'll say good night, Naomi said and stood. Breakfast will be at 8:30. The women looked a bit abashed, as if they didn't expect to be dismissed. Naomi supposed they'd planned to sit in the front room and talk the rest of the evening away, but Naomi knew she wouldn't be able to bear it. She hated to be ungrateful, but she wondered whether their $100 was worth the inquisition. Justin Moore had been so much more fun as a guest. She felt her cheeks grow warm as she ushered the women to the front door. They said good night, and Naomi watched them go down the porch steps. Let me know if you need anything, she called after them, feeling almost guilty, as if she needed to offer something in return for not wanting to spend the whole evening together. But then she realized she was being silly. Surely, it wasn't necessary to entertain guests every moment of their stay. She went to the kitchen where Katie was busy washing dishes. She walked up to her and put her arm around the young girl's shoulders. "I'm sorry, daughter. They are quite the talkers, aren't they?" Katie nodded. "They meant no harm." "I know," Katie said. "Leave these dishes. Why don't you go outside for a bit before bedtime?" Katie pulled her hands from the water, and Naomi handed her a towel. "It'll get better, you know. Every month that passes. It'll get better." Again, Katie nodded. Then she threw her arms around Naomi in a crushing hug. Naomi held her close for a long while. Katie didn't cry, nor did she make a sound, which was a welcome change. Used to be the girl couldn't stop weeping. Naomi sent up a prayer of gratitude. What she'd said was true. Things were getting better, whether they were consciously aware of it or not. Her mind jolted back to her episode earlier when Zach had intervened. She took a slow breath and kissed the top of Katie's cap. Despite what had happened that afternoon, she was getting better, too. But she was grateful that Zach had been there. She hadn't liked him seeing her like that, but his strong hands helping her inside had been a comfort. He was a good man. How often she thought so. Naomi braced herself the next morning for the onslaught of the women at breakfast. Surprisingly, they were quiet. Both of them looked tired, and Naomi worried that they hadn't slept well or been comfortable in the Dottie house. As they were checking out and paying, Naomi decided to ask them, "Did you sleep all right?" "Neither of us ever sleep well the first night in a new place," Nadine said. She put her hand on Naomi's arm. "Now, don't you get upset about it. It had nothing to do with the accommodations. Everything was real comfortable." "I'll put the bags in the car," Lynette called through the door. Nadine went on. "We want to thank you for everything. Actually, we're sorry we can't stay another night. We'll be sharing all about your place with our friends, though. So be expecting more guests." Nadine leaned close as if making an important announcement. "My book club has read quite a few Amish romances. They're going to be plumb jealous of me and Lynette. I imagine a few of them will book a stay immediately." She glanced around the top of the expansive oak desk as if searching for something. "Do you have a phone?" Naomi shook her head. "Not yet. I will get one soon." And she realized it was true. She would get one soon, although she didn't have a clue about what was involved in buying a cell phone. "Wonderful. Why don't I give you my number and when you get a phone, you give me a call? I'll spread the word to my book club. My relatives, too. They'd fancy a night with the Amish." Naomi took down Nadine's number. "I guess that's it, then." Nadine gave her a smile. "Don't be too surprised if you see us again next year. We pass through this way every year on our way up to Chicago. We have a conference there. It's a church retreat of sorts. Why, you might be interested. It's quite—" "Nadine," Lynette called from the porch. "Are you coming? We're going to be late. And you know the Chicago traffic. We'll be lucky to arrive at all." Nadine laughed. "Okay. I'm off. Goodbye, Naomi." Naomi hurried with her to the door and waved them off. As the billows of dust followed them out of the drive, she couldn't help but smile. For all their nosy ways, they really were nice women. Truth be told, they weren't so different from many of her own people. After all, didn't her fellow women friends want to know everything about everyone, too? She'd have that confirmed soon enough at the quilting frolic on Saturday. On a whim, she decided to walk down the drive to check again on her sign. The heat of the sun wrapped itself around her like a woolen cape as she tread over the dirt and smooth stones. The warm earth felt good on her bare feet, and she swung her arms loosely at her sides, feeling almost carefree. When she got to the road, she saw the sign still standing, looking even sturdier than when she and the children had first put it up. She wondered whether it was settling into the ground. She shaded her eyes against the sun's rays and considered the sign further. She supposed it had a bit of charm to it, despite the somewhat messy writing and amateurish appearance. Squinting her eyes, she imagined a new sign there. A beautiful carved sign, announcing Byler's bed and breakfast in plain box letters, all evenly done in beautiful oak wood. It would be lovely. The whine of a car's motor coming close brought Naomi from her reverie, and she turned to go back to the house. There were still some morning chores to be done, and she thought she'd prepare a special snack for the children that morning. A week passed with no guests. Naomi didn't mind as she had plenty to do. Attending the quilting frolic had inspired her to begin a new quilt of her own. She decided to use pieces from Isaac's and her parents' clothing. She would incorporate them into 2 quilts and give one to Ben and one to Katie. The idea pleased her greatly, and she couldn't wait to begin. She decided to keep her work a secret from the children and surprise them with the finished quilts. They would be right fine keepsakes. Zachariah had been as good as his word, fixing the pig pen for them. Ben had helped, and during supper time that evening, he had excitedly recounted how each nail was pounded. With a feeling of contentment, Naomi had watched the glimmer in his eyes and the glow on his face. Now, if she could only find a way to bring that look of pleasure to Katie's face. "Ma'am," Katie said, opening the screen door and coming out to join Naomi on the porch. "Can I go to see Liz? I haven't played with her for a long time." Naomi smiled. "She can come over here to play if you'd like. You could make cookies together." Katie loved baking more than just about anything. Katie grimaced. "Liz hates to cook." "But does she hate to eat?" Naomi asked, with a twinkle in her eye. Katie laughed. "She likes to eat. Why not go over and ask her to come? If you don't want to bake cookies, I will. Either way, you'll both get a treat." Katie gave her a quick hug. "Thanks, ma'am." She skipped down the steps and was halfway to the road when she paused and turned back. "We don't have to let Ben play with us, do we?" Naomi usually insisted that Ben be included. Katie fussed about it, but she was a fairly good sport. Naomi supposed that it was time Katie and Liz had playtime without a young brother hanging around. "No, daughter, Ben doesn't have to play with you." Katie grinned and took off running, kicking up a few loose rocks as she sped away. Naomi picked up a pair of Ben's trousers from the basket beside her and began to mend the hole in the knee. The patch she'd attached only the month before had already pulled loose. "Typical boy," she mused, as she threaded her needle. A sense of peace filled her as she sat there, rhythmically pushing and pulling the needle in and out of the fabric. There was a faint hum of insects in the air, and a slight breeze touched her face. With a start, she realized she was smiling. She was sitting there on her porch, smiling, for no real reason. "Dear God, thank you," she whispered. "You truly are with us, watching over us and caring for us. Thank you." No sooner had she spoken her prayer than she opened her eyes to see a white car coming up her drive toward the porch. Her breath caught in her throat. A white car. She stood and dropped the mending to the floor. Is it? Could it be? Impossible. The car was close enough that she could see the driver clearly through the windshield. She saw his strong jaw, his whiskered chin, and his delighted smile. Her heart froze within her. What was he doing? Why had he come? Her first instinct was to run inside the house, slam the door, and hide. Her second instinct was to run down the steps and greet him with her own delighted smile. She did neither. She stood on the edge of the porch, like a chiseled sculpture, her mind racing through possible reasons for his presence. The car engine stopped and he got out, stretching tall and again impressing her with his unusual height. "Naomi," he said, and her name was like a melody on his lips. She blinked, opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came forth. "I've shocked you," he stated. He shut his car door and came around to the bottom of the steps. "I would have called, but," he shrugged, his smile still holding. "Since there's no phone, that wasn't going to work." He took a step up, and Naomi's pulses raced. "Aren't you even going to greet me?" His smile shortened at the edges. "Have I made a mistake? Coming again?" Good afternoon, Justin," she stammered. He exhaled and tilted his head. "I knew it was a risk. Me coming back so soon. But I do have a reason. I have something for you." Her eyebrows rose. She clasped her hands to her chest, feeling completely dismayed. And excited. And afraid. And disgusted with herself for all three emotions. Justin Moore was a kind man. He wasn't to be feared. He was a friend. Pure and simple. There was nothing wrong with that. Was there? Oh. What was she to do? He laughed, a low quiet chuckle. "Oh, Naomi, if you could see your face? The emotions playing over it would do you well in Hollywood." He laughed again. "May I sit?" He gestured with his head toward an empty rocker on the porch. "Ja," she muttered, struggling to get herself under control. "Of course. How nice to see you again, Mr. Moore." "Mr. Moore, huh?" He shrugged. "I'll take it. Better than being called an ogre or a beast or a cheeky fellow." She frowned, unsure of what he obviously meant as a joke. "Can I get you some lemonade?" "That would be lovely. Mighty warm today, isn't it?" "I'll be back in a moment," she said and hurried inside. She practically ran to the kitchen in her haste to put some distance between the two of them. She grabbed the glass pitcher of lemonade from the refrigerator and snatched 2 glasses from the cupboard. He had something for her? What could it possibly be? And she couldn't take gifts from a fancy man. What was he thinking? She poured the drink and taking a deep breath, she carried both glasses outside. He reached for one, and she was careful that their fingers didn't touch. He took a long drink and sighed. "So good. Thank you, Naomi." She sat in her rocker and raised her glass to her lips with a shaky hand. She took a small sip and then looked at him. "I'm sorry," he said. "I can see that you're still shocked to see me." He looked at her with his gold-flecked brown eyes, that rare color which had intrigued her weeks ago when he'd first stayed at the bed and breakfast. Now, he was gazing at her again, his eyes telling her how much he'd missed her. How much he cared. She could see it plain as day, and she squirmed in her chair. "As I told you, staying here meant the world to me. I was trying to think of something I could do to help you. I have been singing your praises to anyone with half an ear." He chuckled. "And there are people who will probably stay here in the next few months because of my bragging. At least, I hope so." "Thank you," Naomi murmured, her hands grasping her glass. She sat still, afraid to move, almost afraid to speak. Had she given the wrong impression to Justin when he was there last? Had she led him to believe? She couldn't continue her line of thought out of fear as to where it might lead her. Chapter 7. Truth be told, there was something charming and magnetic about the man sitting beside her. He had a playful, curious spirit which she found refreshing and intriguing. She wouldn't soon forget the time he'd helped gather the eggs. He'd been like a child tasting candy for the first time. Just thinking about it brought a smile to her lips. "What?" he asked, leaning slightly forward. "What's funny?" "You're smiling." Her eyes widened in alarm. Was she so transparent? "Nothing," she said quickly. He narrowed his eyes for the briefest moment and then grinned at her. "You look good, Naomi." "Happy?" She nodded as discomfort tingled up her spine. She wasn't accustomed to being analyzed publicly. "I'm glad to see it." "Very glad." Before she could even begin to think about responding, she heard a clatter inside the barn. She turned, craning her neck to see if it was Ben. It wasn't. Her breath froze in her throat as Zachariah appeared at the barn door. Even at that distance, she saw the look of shock on his face upon seeing her guest. She saw his shoulders rise, and he went completely still. Justin had followed her gaze to the barn, and he also went still. Naomi cleared her throat and searched for something to say. Her discomfort grew as the silence stretched, but just as she despaired about what to do, Justin relaxed and said in a casual tone, "That's the man who leases your land, right? Isn't his name Zachariah something or other?" "Zachariah King," she answered. "So, he uses your barn, too?" Naomi quelled the flicker of irritation his question brought forth. "He fixes things for me," she said. She had an inexplicable urge to enumerate all the different things Zach had done for her of late. "That's nice of him," Justin said, turning toward her. "I didn't realize he did so much." Naomi frowned. Justin's mood had changed, and she wasn't sure she wanted to go there with him. She straightened her posture and smiled. "It's a farm. Things need doing all the time." Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Zach move. She fully expected him to retreat back to the fields, knowing he wasn't one for small talk, but she was wrong. He was heading directly toward them. Since Zach was coming from behind, Justin seemed unaware of his approach, but Naomi saw him clearly. She saw the dark, angry-looking shadows on his face. She rose to her feet, and Justin turned around to watch Zach approach along with her. Justin stood beside Naomi. "Hello, Zachariah. How nice to see you again." He took a step down the stairs and extended his hand. Zach closed the distance between them and shook hands, his eyes steady on the Englischer. "Mr. Moore." There was censure in his tone. Zach looked up at Naomi, and she met his gaze. 1,000 questions were in his eyes, but she hardly knew what to say. Justin coming hadn't been her idea. "What brings you to Hollybrook again?" Zach asked, and there was emphasis on the word again. "I have something for Mrs. Byler," Justin said, sitting back down and rubbing his hands over his thighs. "So, I am Mrs. Byler when Zach is around." Zach's expression darkened further. "And what might that be?" Justin turned from Zach to Naomi. "It's coming tomorrow," he said. "I do hope you like it." "What's coming?" Zach asked, his voice louder than usual. "It's a sign," he said. He looked at Naomi, and his eyes brightened. "I had a sign professionally made for you. I hope you like it." "A sign?" She was stunned. How in the world did Justin know how much she wanted one? "Yes. For your business." Often signs for B&Bs are lit up, but obviously that isn't going to work for you. "I ordered one to be made of wood. It's being delivered and installed tomorrow." Naomi's lips parted but no sound came forth. She was still gaping at him, her emotions a tangled mess as she realized just how far he had overstepped. He rushed on. "But I noticed you already have a sign. I saw it on my way in." "If you don't want a new one," say the word. I didn't want to butt in. Butt in? Zach asked. His face had gone completely white. Naomi had rarely seen anyone with such a pale expression. Butt in, he repeated. A new sign is wonderful good, Naomi hastily remarked. A new sign? It still hadn't fully registered. I was wanting one so badly. Thank you, Mr. Moore. Your feelings wouldn't be hurt, then, if the other one is removed? Hardly. Katie helped me with it, but we both thought it looked quite unprofessional. That's wonderful. Justin gave her a warm smile. So it is all right. Naomi took a quick intake of breath. Was it all right to accept a gift from an Englisher like that? But how could she turn it down? Wouldn't that be rude? Wasn't she obliged to accept a gift so freely given? Her gaze flitted to Zach, and her chest tightened. His paleness was gone, and his face had turned red. The man looked ready to explode. I'd have to pay you for it, of course, she said quickly, hoping that would calm Zach down. Her mind whirled. There was no way she would be able to find money to pay for a sign. No, Justin frowned. No, of course not. The whole idea was to do something nice for you. I mean, something nice for your B&B. You came all the way from wherever to tell her about the sign? Zach asked. Why didn't you write? Zach's words rankled Naomi. He was being downright rude. He wasn't her relative. Nor was he her bishop or preacher. He didn't have authority to be tossing out such questions. Zach glanced at her and surely he could see the irritation on her face, but if anything, he looked more determined than ever to pursue his line of questioning. His eyes turned back to Justin. You're right, Zachariah, Justin said smoothly, but Naomi thought she saw his fists clench slightly. Fact is, I had other business this way and wanted to deliver the news personally. Zach didn't respond. He simply stood, his shoulders raised, his gaze unwavering. Would you like some lemonade, Zach? Naomi asked, desperate to break the tension. I'd be glad to get you some. She snapped her mouth shut, stunned by the look on Zach's face. His eyes had glazed over, and if she didn't know better, he looked like he was in anguish. Something unfathomable in his eyes reached out to her, and she found herself wanting to move toward him, to step down the stairs and stand beside him. To put her hand on his arm. He moved back a pace. No lemonade for me. I'll be going. Good day. He turned on his heel and walked away, and his shoulders visibly lowered. They sank to the point of drooping, as if weighted down with an unimaginable burden. Zach! Naomi called after him. He paused and glanced back over his shoulder. Thank you, she said, wondering what she was thanking him for. He raised his hand in a wave and kept walking. Nice to see you again, Justin called to his retreating back. Naomi sank down to her chair, realizing she still clutched her nearly full glass of lemonade. He's upset, Justin observed. I don't blame him. A trembling started deep within Naomi's stomach. Shaking, she raised the lemonade to her lips and took a sip. Am I getting into the middle of something? Justin asked, studying her. Naomi frowned, her stomach now aching. Of course not. Good. Then, do you have a vacancy? He asked with a smile. She answered. You can have your same room again. Marvelous. No charge, of course, she continued, swallowing past a metallic taste in her mouth. Can you consider it a payment of sorts? For the sign, I mean. He stared at her for a long moment and then smiled. Yes. I would say a free night covers the sign very nicely. Naomi knew it wasn't true. A well-done sign would cost much more than $100, but it was all she could do right then. Let me grab my bag. Justin nearly leapt down the steps and went to his car. His excitement was palpable, and the acid-like taste in Naomi's mouth increased. Chapter 8. Why didn't you bring Liz home? Naomi asked when Katie appeared back home alone. She couldn't come. Her mother had her watching her brothers. Katie shrugged. It's okay, though. She said she could come over tomorrow. I'm glad to hear that. Why is he here? The Englischer, Katie asked her mother as they worked together preparing a light supper of cold cuts, home-baked bread, pickles, glazed carrots, and fresh sugar cookies. Naomi set her bread knife down. Katie girl, you won't believe it. What? He's gotten us a new sign for our bed and breakfast. Isn't that wonderful? A new sign? Katie's forehead creased. What do you mean? He's having a new sign delivered tomorrow. You won't feel badly, will you, if we take down the one we made? Katie shook her head and smiled. Ma'am, it's still ugly. Naomi grinned, relieved that Katie didn't seem upset about either the sign or Justin's presence. But why is he giving us a sign? I think he was so happy to be our first guest last month. But doesn't he live a long ways from here? He lives in Texas. He sure came a long way to bring a sign. Katie shook her head. That he did. Naomi picked up the knife and continued slicing the bread. But it was a nice thing to do. Katie pursed her lips as if she was giving that a bit of thought. Then she shrugged and picked up the bowl of pickles to set on the table. Ma'am, Ben called, zooming into the kitchen from the washroom. Where's Mr. Zach? He ain't in the fields. Naomi turned toward her son, taking in his mussed hair and dirty trousers. I think he went home. Zach rarely left before supper time. Truth be told, he often stayed well past mealtime, puttering about in the barn. She knew Zach hadn't been happy regarding Justin's presence, but it seemed odd that he would have left and not returned all afternoon. I wanted to show him my rock. Ben's expression drooped. It's really a good one. Your rock? Katie asked, starting to laugh. It's not funny. Ben cried. Look. He opened his fist and showed them a smooth gray stone with a copper-colored streak running through it. That's right, pretty, Naomi said, giving Katie a look. Ben, Katie played along. It's a nice one. Ben's face perked up. But I want to show Mr. Zach. He likes rocks. He'll be back tomorrow, Naomi said. Now go wash up for supper. We have a guest for the night. Who? Mr. Moore. You remember him, don't you? He stayed a few weeks back. I remember. Ben wandered back to the washroom. It's 6 o'clock. Let's get the food on the table, Naomi said. No sooner were the dishes on the table than Justin came in through the side door. I'm here, he called out, walking through to the dining area. We're ready, Naomi said. Won't you sit down? Thank you. He smiled at the children. Hello again, you two. It's nice to see you again. Hi, Ben said with a shy smile. Hello, Mr. Moore, Katie said. Shall we pray? Naomi asked when everyone got situated. She bowed her head and felt at a total loss as to what to pray. Her feelings had been in complete turmoil since Justin had driven up to the door, and the guilt that was nagging around the edges of her heart wanted to wield its power. She gulped. Why should she feel guilty? She'd done nothing wrong. But she had. She had entertained thoughts of an Englischer, a fancy man, and she was feeling flattered that Justin thought enough of her to return all the way from Texas with a gift. An important gift. Something she really wanted. And she was accepting it, too. Had she really done nothing wrong? She became aware of Ben fidgeting beside her. She quickly prayed God's blessing upon the food and cleared her throat. Everyone looked up, and Naomi started the food around the table. After supper, Justin went back to the Dottie house and Naomi finished redding up the kitchen. She stood at the sink and peered through the window at the darkening night sky. The long summer days would soon be a thing of the past, and it would be time to haul out the winter capes and coats. She spotted a firefly skimming above the cut grass and smiled. "I'm going to join you outside," she whispered. She walked past the front room where Katie and Ben were playing a game of checkers, slipped outside to the porch, and settled into one of the rockers. She took a long, slow breath and gazed out across the lawn. Her dad and husband had chosen well. The farm was beautiful, and the land was rich and fertile. The trees gracing the front yard had stood for decades, and their fluttering leaves sheltered birds and insects and provided shade when the summer temperatures rose into the 90s. She let out her breath. The night noises were quiet and restful. She heard the faint sound of a horse's clip-clop on the road, and she wondered which of her neighbors was taking a night drive and why. For a moment, she forgot about her guest. She forgot about Zach's earlier dismay. She forgot about the bills piling up on her husband's oak desk. She closed her eyes and just let herself be. "Naomi?" She jerked upright. Justin stood at the bottom of the stairs, smiling up at her. "Oh, Justin. I didn't hear you." He climbed the steps and sat beside her. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to startle you." "No. It's all right." But it wasn't. She wanted to forget he was there. She wanted to pretend that all was well again between her and Zach. She wanted to pretend that she could never have feelings for this man of the world who was sitting much too close. "I missed you," he said, his voice low but tense. She sucked in a quick breath and wished with all her heart that he hadn't spoken. "Will you look at me?" he asked, whispering now. She turned toward him and flinched at the passion reflected in his eyes. Every muscle in her body stiffened, and her throat went dry. "I know I shouldn't say such things." "Well, at least I think I shouldn't. I've been studying the Amish on the internet, trying to find out all I can about your way of life." He had? To what end? "I find your culture and your belief system fascinating." She stared at him, unblinking. She needed to stop this line of conversation and write quick. Nothing good could come of it. "The weather is cooling down these days, don't you think?" He winced, and then he closed his mouth. His eyes searched hers, and she forced herself not to look away. She saw the torment revealed in the depths of his gaze. She saw the conflict there. His unrest appeared as deep as hers. A silence fell between them as they continued to stare at one another. Naomi's heart contracted, and a sadness moved through her. Not the crushing sadness she'd carried since her husband's accident. No, this was different. It was a reluctant sadness, a knowing sadness, a bittersweet sadness that filled her at once with both regret and gratitude. This man, this lovely man beside her was giving her more than a new sign. He was giving her hope. Hope that she could love someone again. Not in the same that she had loved Isaac. No. Isaac had been her first love. She had gone from her parents' loving care to his. She would never love someone the same way she'd loved Isaac. When she loved again, it would be a different love. Perhaps a more tender love. And for certain, a more grateful love. But a solid love, too, and passionate. That would be the same. Justin reached out and took her hand in his. She allowed it, knowing that somehow they were communicating beyond words. Beyond convention. Beyond rules. The sadness she felt, she saw it in his eyes, too. She saw his love there, also, and she was touched and deeply grateful. As he continued to look at her, she saw the moment when his final resignation set in. His expression wilted, and he knew. He knew that it would never work between the two of them. He knew it would never be possible. "Oh, Naomi. You don't want the sign, do you?" His voice was low and thick, and his eyes filled with tears. She didn't answer right away, but she gently peeled his fingers away from her hand. She took her palm from his and clasped her hands in her lap. He looked down at his own empty hand for a long minute, and then he looked back up to her. "It was a crazy thought," he said. "A long shot. The longest shot ever. But I had to try. You understand that, don't you?" She had trouble swallowing around the growing lump of tears in her throat. She nodded her head. "It's like a force driving me," he continued. His eyes held her. "Forgive me for saying this, but I love you, Naomi Byler." Her fingers tightened around each other in a claw grip. He shook his head. "You don't have to say anything. In fact, I don't want you to say anything. But I had to tell you. I had to." He spoke the last 3 words slowly, over-enunciating each one. "If your world were different, if my world were different, I think we would have stood a real chance." He shook his head and rubbed his hand over his mouth. Then he lowered his hand again to his side. He went on. "I know you care for me. It's in your eyes." He blinked and a tear rolled down his cheek. "Now, sitting here with you again, in your world, I see that it's not enough. My love isn't enough. It will never be enough. Our worlds will never be bridged. Love alone can't do that." Naomi's lips quivered. He reached over and touched her hand. "No, Naomi, don't worry. I'm not hurt. Sad, yes. Unbearably sad. But I see it clearly tonight. I know, now that I look at you, that it won't work. How I wish it would. You'll never know how much I wish it would. But thank you." His voice choked up, and he paused before continuing. "Thank you for the best 5 days of my life." He shook his head. 6, now, I guess." Naomi's eyes welled with tears, and she could hardly see through them to gaze at him. She was filled with such emotion, such tenderness for him, that she couldn't speak. "I will leave first thing in the morning. Without breakfast. I'll be gone before you even get up. And I'll cancel the sign installation. I don't want you to worry about anything." He stood and gazed down at her, and she thought her heart would break with the poignancy of it all. He stepped away then, but she scrambled up and pulled on his hand. Standing on her tiptoes, she broke across all rules of behavior and kissed him gently on the cheek. She felt his stubby whiskers as she lingered there for one sweet moment. He sucked in his breath and stood frozen. She backed away. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, Justin Moore." He touched his forehead in a salute and walked slowly and quietly around the house in the growing darkness. When he disappeared from sight, Naomi sank back into her rocker and closed her eyes. She murmured a prayer, asking for forgiveness. She had started down a path of no return, and she was repentant for that. And then, she thanked God. She thanked him for his love and his mercy and his grace. She thanked him that she was alive. She covered her mouth in shock and began rocking, starting slowly and gaining in speed, until the rocker was rapidly creaking back and forth. "I am grateful to be alive." She hadn't been grateful for life in months. Not since the accident. Something inside her was cracking open, and she marveled at the budding joy that was being released. She felt like running through the fields with her arms stretched wide. She felt like wiggling into the tire swing and flying up to the sky. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and she smiled up at the stars. She glanced around to the corner of the house where Justin had vanished. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you. Thank you. Thank you." Justin was as good as his word. By the time Naomi arose, his car was gone. She stared down at the empty spot where his car had been parked, and she wondered how far down the road he had gone. She wished him Godspeed, and then she quickly dressed to get about her chores. In the kitchen, she pulled the bowl of eggs from the refrigerator. It would just be the three of them that morning. She glanced up at the clock. It was plenty early, and she felt an urge to gather up the dirty sheets and towels from the Dottie house. Justin Moore was gone, never to return. She wanted to wash everything up. She padded outside through the side door and entered the Dottie house. It was still fairly dark, but she knew every inch of the house. In the bedroom, she saw that Justin had already stripped the bed and folded the quilt at the end of the mattress. She gathered up the sheets, when something caught her eye. Bending over, she saw a $100 bill on top of a folded piece of paper. She sank onto the bed, and holding the note close to the window, she read, "Since you won't be taking the sign, I wanted to pay you for my night here. Naomi, thank you for everything. Everything. I will remember you till my dying day. I hope you'll be happy. I know you will be. I also know that you won't be alone for long. He loves you, you know. My deepest regards. Justin." Naomi pressed his note to her chest and felt tears sting the back of her eyes. "I will remember you, too," she thought. "Forever." She stood and tucked the note and the money into her apron. "He loves you, you know." She gazed out the window and watched the pink sky spread across the horizon as the sun climbed into a new day. Zach. Did he love her? She wasn't sure. Possibly. She scooped up the sheets and went into the bathroom and snatched Justin's wet towel from the rung. Zach. A slow smile crept over her face. He'd be arriving soon to work in the fields, and she realized that she was excited to see him. His presence on the farm was a comfort. She liked him there. Liked the way he interacted with Ben. Liked his steady ways. He loves you, you know. She hugged the laundry to her chest and slipped out of the Dottie house. The contented smile remained on Naomi's face all the way into the big house and all the way upstairs to wake the children. The end. Thank you for listening to The Englischer Stayed Twice by Brenda Maxfield. Book 3 in the Naomi story series, Naomi's Choice, will be coming soon. Watch for it. You can be assured that all of Brenda's books are clean and wholesome. To find other romances by Brenda Maxfield, as well as the other authors at Tika House Publishing, visit www.tikahousepublishing.com. Remember to hit like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next Brenda Maxfield Amish romance.